how good do the people in my life, or how well do they do at apologizing? How well do the people in my life say I'm sorry and own that and take responsibility for their lives?
If you can't look at your own shit, for lack of a better phrase, and have the courage to look at it and then dive into what's really vulnerable, which is owning it and acknowledging it, how are you going to do that with somebody else? Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
And it's Emilia.
Welcome to another episode of Evolve Ventures, where we're helping growth minded humans evolve by breaking one limiting belief at a time. We hope you enjoyed the last episode, number 264. Are you making moves but still unfulfilled? For today, 265, Motivation Monday, 5 red flags to pay attention to in your relationships. This is not an episode that's just going to be about intimate relationships like dating or marriage. This is across the board in all relationships. What are the things that you need to be looking out for and paying attention to? So, Emilia and I brainstormed and we came up with 5 that we really believe are like pivotal, crucial things to pay attention to.
Yeah. And honestly, having been observant to relationships, whether it be my relationship with my hair or my relationship with my friend or my relationship with my intimate partner, having so much of a studious lens to that, I'm super excited for this episode. So let's just kind of get started. And what I want to do to get started is, for all of our listeners, I want you to crack open that heart, crack open that mind, and I want you to really be present with us to start to pay attention. Because I think that here's the thing where we think that we're paying attention to our lives and to the interdynamics that we're going to get into in this episode, but yet we really, really aren't. Because when we start to settle into what we're going to say in this episode, it's going to hit all the feels. Because we have all been there. Either we have been the person who has been the red flag, or we have been someone who has observed, and even worse, has experienced the red flags. And I know,
And the recipient of.
exactly, I know that you all know what this is going to feel like, whether you're in the recipient category, whether you're in the bystander category, or whether you're in the red flag person category. So anyways, with that said,
The doer.
the doer demon. All right, so happy Monday, and let this episode open your attention up more to this so that you can start to shift into, when I'm now actually paying attention to these things, what do I start to do about them? And that's where we're going to kind of leave you on this episode, because every situation is different. So first one, I really, 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 really times 1,000 believe that all relationships have a different level of this. And I want us thinking about all of these elements, these red flags, they fall on a spectrum, like a continuum, right? So 0 to 10. And I want you as a listener, even you and I, asking, where is our level of humility, which is number 1, for all of these red flags? Okay, so 0 to 10, where is our humility or lack thereof? So for example, I believe that humility is one of the biggest green flags to pay attention to in the relationships. The lack of humility is a red flag, and here's why. So oftentimes, more than not, you find people are not cultivating the skill of humility. To be humble is to know that you don't know it all, and to know that you're a work in progress, to know that there are new chapters, there are 2.0, 3.0, 30 million.0 versions of yourselves in this game of life. And so when it comes to whatever it is, whether it's your career, your intimate relationship, your family dysfunction, working through that, you know that there is more to be learned here and there's more to grow in. And so having a lack of humility is someone who is arrogant and That is the red flag that I want to talk about. Number one, hands down, that I want all of us paying attention to. Where is the lack of humility, 0 to 10, in our relationships? The people that do not accept humility into their lives, into their character, into their state of being. Because likely it's with those type of people that you're always feeling less than, insignificant, invaluable, unseen, unheard, undervalued. And it's because of this lack of humility.
Mm. And again, to reiterate, all of these are on a spectrum. It is not you have this or you don't, it's at what level. Number 2 is lack of courage. So, courage is one of the most important things in a relationship. And what that's going to look like is the ability to open up, the ability to be willing to dive in, to say, I'm struggling with this, or I need this, or I don't want this, or to just speak your truth. If someone is lacking courage, they're not being open, they're not being honest, they're not being forthright with themselves or with you. And in a relationship, that can be the death of a relationship, because you're not having the courage to show up authentically and to do the necessary work to make the relationship as successful and healthy and fulfilling as it can be.
Facts. I have a quote from J.R.R. Tolkien, the person who wrote the Hobbit films. A quote that I use when I talk to clients about the word courage that I really pull in, and I love it because he says it's not the strength of the body that counts, right? When we think about courage, it's like leaning in. I just always am thinking about leaning in into the fear, into whatever the struggle is, but it's the strength of the spirit. And why I love that quote is because I think it exemplifies so beautifully the articulation of what it actually means to be courageous. So a lack of courage in a relationship is someone who's actually leaning out, right? Cowardice. This is someone who's avoiding, who's running away instead of leaning in. And that compounded over time is quite the red flag. And I've seen it. We've all experienced those moments when we've been a coward in our life. And that was the red flag in the relationship. Because why? If you're not leaning into speaking your truth, for example, right? You're not going to be able to have that opportunity to grow in your connection in your relationship. So, number 3, these two are so like twin sisters, I like to call them, literally so linked, is a lack of vulnerability. So 0 to 10, where are your relationships in this? I know for me, when I first started to get into vulnerability work, it was so freaking hard. And I was literally just talking with a client on this. I was like, this is one of my biggest icks was vulnerability. It still is. But I know how important it is. I was the red flag of the lack of vulnerability in a lot of my relationships. So I was that for a long time. So I was not the observer nor the recipient in this situation for a long part of my life, but I was actually the doer of having such a lack of vulnerability. Working on it. We're coming in here. So here's the thing. When you have a lack of vulnerability, I know it, everything's a joke. Nothing really becomes serious. And there are always the narratives that are underneath it that to be vulnerable is a weakness. And I know because I had that. Man, it's a lot easier to get through life when everything's a joke, nothing really is serious. And when you just have to button up, you have to shield up, and you have to put on your armor and walk through life. Life's a lot easier when that happens, right?
But most people who can't be... Oh, sorry. I thought you
I was just going to say, yeah, dramatic pause. But what is also the truth in this, now being on the other end of really working on my personal vulnerability and starting to become a green flag in this arena, is that you don't have that connection. And life is not easy when you don't have those deep connections with people through the lens of vulnerability.
No.
All you.
Sorry, Em.
All good. Just trying to be vulnerable.
See? I was just going to say, we're both vulnerable right now. I'm sorry. I'm taking ownership of cutting you off.
I'm going to cut you out now. As a ex-avoidant, I'm going to cut you out now. That's it.
Why are you leaving me?
Oh, no. Oh, jeez. For anyone in the back, Bianca is a conditioned anxious attachment, so that was just a little punny joke. Oh, jeez.
Oh god. Okay, anyways. I can't.
While she's giggling, I want to pull in Brené's quote. Brené says vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And I think that is like where the essence of our existence lies. Like literally, like just in this, you can feel it. You can feel like we're having a hard time coming back. It's okay because we're connected over this moment now.
Honestly, it's all good. The lack of vulnerability with others comes from a lack of vulnerability within yourself. If you can't look at your own shit, for lack of a better phrase, and have the courage to look at it and then dive into what's really vulnerable, which is owning it and acknowledging it, how are you going to do that with somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. So, are they vulnerable with themselves? And then how are they showing up with you? The next one is inconsistent or a lack of consistency. And this doesn't mean like, oh, I text you one day and the next day I don't, or I don't text you for 3 hours or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. This is somebody who they're inconsistent in their overall behavior. They're inconsistent in their beliefs. They're inconsistent in the way that they show up in their life and in yours. So, for example, this is somebody who one day, let's say, says, you're my favorite person. I love spending time with you. I want to go do this, and this. And then they completely change their tune and they act the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody who says, let's go to the gym together. I can't wait. We're going to go and we're going to go 3 days a week. And then they go once and then they don't come again. And then in 3 weeks, they tell you they want to go and then they stop showing up. It's the lack of consistency in their behavior. So, someone who is consistent is someone who does what they say they're going to do. They show up. If they can't show up, they own that. They are humble and courageous and vulnerable in expressing, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be able to make it. Here's why. Here's what we can do instead. And they'll offer up a different solution. So, are the people in your life showing up the way they're telling you they're going to? Or is their behavior really flip floppy?
Yeah, flaky too. That's
Yeah.
such a great thing, and I think that there is so much of that, and I have a unique lens into some of the dating world through the vulnerability and courage of my clients who are conscious singles, because there's a lot of ghosting that's happening right now in the dating arena, and a lot of flip-floppy in that, like, and I do know that it is a journey to align your words with your actions, because so many people do not recognize how much of a delta there is. So some person might be listening to this and like getting so excited to have this episode be their ammunition, if you will, to like address or confront a relationship that's been red flagging it. So like, again, everything is on a spectrum, okay? And it's contextual. The last one, red flag number 5 to pay attention to in your relationships is ownership, and ownership with responsibility. So I want everyone asking themselves, how good do the people in my life, or how well do they do at apologizing? How well do the people in my life say I'm sorry and own that and take responsibility for their lives? 0 to 10. How well are your relationships doing that on their own accord, unprompted, unpoked by you? You not having to drive their focus over, like, see, this is what happened. And then them all of a sudden saying, well, I'm sorry, like you having to corner them into the sorry corner. I know for so many of my relationships, I didn't realize that this was one of the biggest red flags. because I take over ownership and over responsibility oftentimes, because I didn't realize how much all of my relationships were lacking ownership and responsibility. No one really ever apologized. No one ever said they're sorry. Everyone would just go on the defense, would just say, "Oh, well, I didn't know. It wasn't my fault that I
Yeah.
was born this way. It wasn't my, nothing was anyone's fault growing up." So with that, what I have seen to be consistent in all relationships is the extent to which someone is taking ownership and responsibility. I'll give you a great example of this. So I'm going to say, I am sorry to all of our listeners right now. And this is not me backing myself into a whole corner of apologies, but I literally wanted to make sure that I said this. I am sorry to our listeners right now because the audio from the past couple of episodes were absolute dog doo-doo. And the reason why, and I said I had an apology a couple of weeks ago, I thought the issue was fixed. But here's the thing, I didn't take responsibility to make sure that I did an audio test before every single episode that we just recorded in this batch. And I told Bianca right before this episode, I said, it is my responsibility, it is my fault that the audio came from my AirPods instead of this beautiful mic. And it's because of that there's a potential that our listeners didn't get the depth of one of the best episodes that I think we've recorded, hands down. Psst, 264. That they could have. So with that said, I am sorry because I did not take responsibility, and it was my fault that the audio did not have the highest audio quality possible, which is what we strive for. So what I've done as a result of that, which I want to demonstrate ownership and responsibility, is update every time we record. There's a calendar event. And I've taken the action to put check audio settings immediately right in there. And that is what I will be seeing every single time, which will contribute to a different action. People who do not take ownership nor have any responsibility do not take any different action. And that is just absolute madness of a cycle you can get caught up into, especially when you're the person in the relationship with that person, always seeing that they don't take any ownership or responsibility. If Bianca on the other side was hearing me just never take ownership or responsibility over that, and we just constantly had crappier audio quality episodes, like that's just not fair to her because she's doing the work, right? So that is an example, and that is red flag number 5.
And that just took incredible vulnerability for you to be open and honest about that, and the courage to own, like, hey, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And ownership is not just can you say you're sorry or you're not. Ownership is, do you stand firm in your beliefs? Are you owning your behavior? Are you owning your thoughts? Are you owning your emotions? Or is it, well, they made me feel this way, so it's not my fault?
I'm so glad you
Or
said that.
they did this to me, so it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. Or are you saying, well, if someone's coming up to you and said, hey, you said this and, I felt this way about it. And you're like, I never said that. Don't take ownership for what you say, what you think, what you do.
Yeah.
You can't hold steady, hold truth in your actions and your thoughts and your behaviors and all of these things. That's also a big red flag. It's not just I can't say I'm sorry. It's also I can't own the truth of what I'm doing and the impact I'm having on other people. And not just in an aggressive way, but like, do you own your lack of like security? Do you own your lack of I had a point I wanted to make.
Ooh, I'm going to jump.
Just the insecurities that you have. Because a lot of people, it's not just that they can't own that, like, I made a mistake. They also can't own the difficulties that they're having, the insecurities, the
Also, what makes them great? I think it's your responsibility to take ownership and responsibility of what makes you great.
yes. Thank you. That's
Your
what
wins.
I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hey,
Look at us synced up over here.
look at us.
It's all of these things. You don't own what you're doing really well. You don't own what you're not doing well. And everything is kind of just like flip-flopping.
Yeah.
So all of these really, really go hand in hand. I haven't really seen people who are like, that's not true. Usually the case is that people are good at all of these, and you can tell. Like people who are really good at a couple of these, they're working on getting better at the other ones. Um,
Yeah.
so if this is you and you know that there's a couple of these that you need to work on, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're all a work in progress. We're all working on becoming the best versions of ourselves. And whether you're the person on the receiving end of this and you're consistently finding yourself on the receiving end of this, maybe one of these you need a little bit more work on just within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was the case for me. Courage and vulnerability and ownership of other people's behavior, that's what I really struggled with.
Mm-hmm.
And allowing people to be inconsistent and allowing them to treat me in these ways, I had to take ownership of that and then work on it. So it's okay if you're not a 10 in all of these. Nobody is. The
Mm-mm.
point is, are you willing to look in the mirror and acknowledge this and then start doing the work to change it?
Facts. All right. Let's round this episode with final takeaways and episode suggestions because I know we got to jump. With that being said, my final episode suggestion is going to be 232 why you need relationship standards. B, what you just said about like owning
Hey,
what you need and everything. Oh my goodness, that's right on the point. My final takeaway is something that, are you taking ownership, questioning yourself around all of these red flags, paying attention to, are you taking ownership of your thoughts, your behaviors, what you do, what you say, your emotions, the impact that it has on people, and the willingness that you have to change or evolve in a way that's in integrity with your values. That is what I want us considering, because now that we just laid out the 5, comes in more awareness. So, like I said at the beginning of this episode,
absolutely.
I'm going to say right now, that's where you get to come into the picture. So, B,
Beautiful.
what do you?
Episode suggestion is 224. Is your attachment style hurting you? All right, everybody. We hope you have a magnificent week. Go crush it. And we'll see you next time.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.